Hi guys, Lindsay here with Storybrook Family Farm. So recently I was asked by somebody how much space they actually need to homestead because a lot of people find out that we only have 2 acres here and they seem quite surprised that we're able to grow so much food and raise as many animals as we do. So I figured that this would be a great topic for me to tackle because when we first started homesteading, we were living in town and we actually used to frequently look up and try to find somebody to give us the answer as to how much land we actually would need. And it was very frustrating because most of the time you come across resources that basically are all over the place. Some places will say that you don't need any land to homestead, and other places will say that you need like 20 acres to homestead. And it really didn't give us any sort of guidance as to how much space we actually needed. Um, so from our experience, we found out that it depends. It depends on what it is that you are searching for. So like for us, our big desire is actually to raise all of our own animal products. We are very weird about certain things. Me and my wife are both very sensitive people, and we want all of the products that come from animals to be raised on our own farm. Simply so then that way we know that they had the best possible life that they could have ever dreamed of. We want to make sure that the animal was handled with love and respect and dignity throughout the entire phase of its life. That is one way that we feel comfortable eating meat, is if we do it all ourselves. With that being said, we do have the exception of pigs. We have raised pigs in the past, and neither of us enjoyed the process. So that is something that we will continue to buy from another farm that shares a lot of the similar values that we do in terms of how our food is handled and the animals are kept. So with that being said, the first thing that you want to do if you are thinking about homesteading, you're trying to figure out how much space you actually need, you need to figure out what it is that you want to raise. For us, we have no desire to do cows. Cows are a very large animal, and being a female couple, kind of difficult to maintain something as large as a cow. For dairy, we actually raise Nigerian dwarf goats because they are very manageable for the two of us to just pick one up and move them if we need to. And it makes it very simple for us to trim nails, to do any sort of other checks, or if they're being unruly, we can literally just pick them up and move them where we want, which also is nice because since they are a smaller size, then they don't take up as much space. The other thing that we do is we also raise all of our own chickens. We raise Bantam chickens because they are also smaller. They require less space. They also eat a lot less food, and the eggs are not that much smaller compared to regular chicken eggs. So it's a very economical way to raise a lot of chickens. We raise rabbits for meat. We also have turkeys, ducks, geese, and quail. So we have a lot of different things going on this farm. And, obviously I already said we have goats. So that takes up a good amount of space on our 2-acre plot of land, but it does not even take up an acre. We also have a very large garden, and we have the start of an orchard. We've only owned this place for less than a year, so I think it's been like 10 months or 8 months. I don't remember. So we haven't owned it for very long, so we still are working on putting different systems into place. But when we started this whole journey, we initially thought that we would need like 5 to 10 acres to be able to do exactly what we're doing right now. So we do not raise any of the feed for our animals. We do, harvest grass for the rabbits to eat, and we do cut off tree hay and different branches and things like that to give to the goats as treats and as snacks, and then the chickens, they get all of our kitchen waste scraps. So we do supplement with those sorts of things, but we cannot raise hay here because we only have 2 acres. Our land, half of it is wooded and half of it is open. So the open area is where we have the garden, the orchard. We also have some of the goats in there, but the rest of it, pretty much everything else, is kind of like partially in the woods, partially in an open area and stuff. So it's not fully maxed out here. And we are avid hunters as well. So we want to make sure that the woods stay woody and sort of feral. So then that way we can still have squirrels and deer and wild turkeys running through there. So that puts our homestead as a little bit of a different design because we are intentionally trying to ensure that we have wild spaces and wild areas. Plus, we also like to forage for like different foods like berries and mushrooms and things of that nature. So it definitely lends itself to having our homestead having a wooded area that is left very feral. So essentially, we are only homesteading on about an acre of land here, and we still have room. Our rabbits, we house them in rabbit tractors, so we move them around the grass, so we don't have to mow grass as much. But with all that being said, there are different animals that you can raise in a much smaller space. When we were still living in town, we had 1/4 of an acre of land, and over half of it was shaded. We had a decent sized house. It was just a 2-story house. It didn't take up a huge footprint, but we did have a 2-car garage, which took up about as big of a footprint as the 2-story house did. So in that garage, we actually raised some bantam chickens. We also raised rabbits for meat, and we also raised quail for meat and eggs. So that was, for a lot of people, that would be like the dream of homesteading, having a big sized garden, having some fruit trees, some grapevines, and then raising all of your own eggs and some of your own meat. That is what most people are trying to do. But for us, that wasn't enough. We desperately wanted to also add in the component of having dairy on our farm. And so then that's pretty much what led us on a journey to finding more land and to having more space. So then that way we could bring on the goats and also have the availability to add in different poultry and different, just experiment with different things, because we're very adventurous people that like to try out new things. Hence why we try pigs. But so that's a big starting point for if you are looking at how much land you actually need, is to figure out what animals you need. I know that a good rule of thumb for cows is you need approximately 1 acre per cow. That's a lot of space. Like, even if you just want 2 cows, I mean, that'd be my entire plot of land that I'm raising all of this other food on and stuff just to have cows. And that, to me, that seems kind of crazy. Even if you're doing, rotational grazing and things of that nature, they still need a lot of space. And if you don't have that high amount of space to give them, then you are going to be burning through a lot of hay. With us, because we do not have a massive amount of space for all of the goats that we have to buy a lot of hay even through the summertime. Our goats eat hay through the summer, through the winter, like all the time. So we go through a massive amount of hay simply because we do not have a large enough pasture to make it so we don't have to supplement all of their feed every day and stuff. So those are things too that if you're trying to do this on a smaller scale that you have to take into consideration, is if you have the bare minimum size of paddocks and pastures for animals, you will have to feed them more. You will have to provide a lot more of their calories and their nutrients yourselves. Our chickens, they do free range all over the entire property. They go up in the woods, they do what they want. So our chickens, they pretty much do their own thing. They only eat, and we have, I think, like 45 bantam chickens or something crazy like that. And they only go through like 2 pounds of feed a day, maybe a pound. Like it's not very much feed that we actually have to feed them, because they spend so much of their day and so much of their time just running around foraging, which is really, really nice. But like right now, our turkeys are penned up because they have been wandering a lot. So they've been going through just as much food as all of the chickens or more. And if we allow them to free range, which they won't stay on our property, that's why they're being locked up right now. If we were to allow them to free range, they would go through, we use soup cans to fill up the feed dishes. So right now the turkeys are going through about 6 soup cans a day of, well, they're more of like a green bean can, like a standard vegetable can that you get at like Walmart or, Kroger or wherever you shop at. So they go through like 6 of those normal cans a day right now with being penned up. When they are free ranging and just doing what they please and going where they want, eating all the grass and all the bugs that their hearts desire, they go through about 2 to 3 cans of that food a day. The same exact feed, the same stuff, everything's the same. So if you have more space, clearly you don't have to buy as much food. So like there's books and things like that that talk about, how you can be self-sufficient on just 1/4 of an acre or just, an acre of land. But just know that you are going to be heavily dependent upon the food store, like upon the animal feed store, if you are farming on a very small scale property. Like when we lived in town, we had to provide 100% of our chickens' feed because we weren't actually supposed to raise chickens in town, but we had them like hiding in our garage. So we had to provide everything, every calorie that they ate, everything. We had to bring it to them. Like occasionally they would eat the flies that were in the garage, but like it was a lot. We spent almost as much in feed now as we did then, and back then we had 13 chickens. So having more space for your animals definitely makes a huge difference. But like if you wanted to just have, if your big focus on homesteading was actually just to have a garden, like say you were a vegetarian and you just didn't want to raise animals for meat, for whatever reason and stuff, you wouldn't need anywhere near as much land as what we have because you're not raising that many animals. If you're only having chickens for eggs, you don't need that many chickens to have and stuff. Like, we also sell our eggs, so we naturally have to have more chickens and stuff. But if you're trying to do just basically some fruit, veggies for your family and some eggs, you could easily do that on 1/4 of an acre. However, if you're wanting to have a big egg operation where you're going to, have a farm stand set up outside, you're going to want significantly more chickens because people are going to want to buy your eggs. So you can see how different things would need to be scaled up or scaled down depending upon what you want. If you are somebody that's heavily allergic to milk or dairy products or just doesn't like those, it wouldn't make any sense whatsoever for you to get goats. So you wouldn't need to calculate that amount of space into the equation for how much land you would need. So that's basically the best breakdown that I can do is, if you're trying to figure this whole thing out, figure out what it is exactly that you want to raise, and then figure out what sort of spacing that those critters need. And basically, the bare minimum is always just a bare minimum to get by. The animals will be miserable if you keep them in their bare minimum spots that you can find on the internet. I would honestly suggest double or triple what the bare minimum space is, because if they're too close together, they will fight, they will get hurt, they will get bored, they will get destructive. That's when goats will start escaping, is when they're bored or when they don't have enough space. They'll just go find more space themselves and stuff. So that's something to definitely keep into consideration. And then the other thing too is, how much do you want to grow on your own? Do you want to try to strive for just having fresh fruits and veggies for your family throughout the summer? Or do you want to also preserve some of that? Because that would also depend on, that would dictate how big of space you would need in terms of gardening. So for us, it seems like it's a never-ending battle of, we don't have enough space, we don't have enough space, we don't have enough space for gardening. Every year that we've gardened, we just keep expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding and growing outwards, simply because of the fact that we really like to have a big variety of different stuff. We like to experiment with different things, to basically just taste all the flavors and taste all of the wondrous beauty that the world has to offer in terms of flavor, and also different things look different and some things are just fun to grow. So then once we find something we really like, then we really, really like it. So we want to have enough that we can preserve it. So that is something that you definitely want to look into as well. And then the other thing is, how do you want your homestead to look? Are you okay with it looking cluttered and jammed packed with abundance? Or are you wanting it to be more like, like the farms that you see on TV or like on Instagram or whatever, where, there's beautiful walkways and aisleways and everything just looks perfectly spaced out and all of this stuff? Because if you're going to farm like that, if you're going to homestead like that, you need more space. If you don't care if it looks cluttered, you don't need as much space. Through companion planting and stacking functions and growing things closer together and following different principles like permaculture principles and stuff, you can grow a lot of food in a very small space. However, not a lot of people like the aesthetic of it. I don't mind growing a lot of food in a very small space and having it be feeling kind of cluttered and kind of like a jungle inside of the garden, but my wife absolutely hates it. So we have to compromise. I have to make very wide walkways, but then have basically garden beds that are just toed up spots within the garden. They're not raised beds, they're just plots of space to grow in. And then in them spaces, I can jam pack it with a whole bunch of abundance of plants and veggies and things like that. But I cannot, because of her desires to have it orderly, I cannot make narrow walkways. When we lived in town, I made narrow walkways and she wouldn't come into the garden because it was too claustrophobic for her. She didn't like it. And it was very frustrating for her to try to walk in and out of the garden because we didn't have much space and I wanted to grow a massive amount of food. So the walkways would start out being about 16 inches wide, and then as the growing season progressed, as things grew into the walkways, there would be basically enough space to sort of shimmy sideways down through the aisles, and then you were still touching plants the entire way through. I kind of liked it, but she absolutely hated it, which when I was harvesting stuff with the basket and everything, it was kind of a pain in the butt, just because you had to carry the basket up like this, so that way it was up higher than all the plants. So those are some different things to definitely consider. And then the other thing too to consider is what your growing area is like. So for me, I live in Ohio, so we have a good long growing season, but there's definitely wintertime. Like right now, it is actually Halloween, and we've already had our first frost. There is pretty much nothing growing in the garden except for the cabbage family stuff, like kohlrabi, turnips, things like that can handle cold temperatures and stuff. So our growing season is pretty much done until about April and stuff. So we got a good long while to, prep the beds and do different things. But for some places, like down further south and stuff, you have a much longer growing season. So you don't have to worry about growing as much stuff to prepare for wintertime if you, desire to have enough food to, from your garden to eat just your garden stuff throughout the winter. So those are some different things that I have learned throughout doing the whole homesteading process and homesteading on multiple properties, and also us searching to find the perfect amount of land. With that being said, having 2 acres is kind of like the bare minimum for us to be able to do what we want to do. So if you are somebody that also wants to have a big bunch of wild spaces, I would highly recommend, if you're able to afford it and find it, trying to get more like 5 acres. Just so then that way you have more area to go hunting and foraging and stuff. But yeah, so if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. I would love to answer them and do my best to try to help you guys out. All right, if you're enjoying this content, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends on social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to help us grow. We would greatly appreciate it. All right, thanks for watching. Have a good one, guys.